No one noticed the old man collapse. Not the people rushing past with coffee in their hands. Not the businessmen arguing into their phones. Not the couple laughing as they crossed the street. In the middle of downtown Ravenport, Illinois, an elderly man stumbled and nearly fell face first onto the concrete, except one person saw him. And that single moment, less than 3 seconds long, would quietly trigger a chain of events powerful enough to shake an entire criminal empire. Her name was Naomi Carter. She was 19 years old, broke, hungry, and already late for a shift that barely paid her enough to survive. Naomi worked 2 jobs, one cleaning offices at night, another waiting tables during the day. She lived in a cramped studio apartment above a laundromat, the kind where the heat barely worked and the walls were thin enough to hear strangers argue at 2 a.m. That morning, she had skipped breakfast. Again. As Naomi hurried down the sidewalk, her phone buzzed. A message from her manager. If you're late again, don't bother coming. She clenched her jaw and picked up her pace until something in her peripheral vision made her stop. The old man. He stood frozen near the crosswalk, his hands trembling, his eyes darting in confusion. His suit was expensive but worn. His shoes were polished but scuffed. He looked completely out of place and completely lost. Then he swayed. Naomi reacted without thinking. She dropped her bag and rushed forward just as his knees buckled. "Sir!" She caught him. Barely. He was heavier than he looked, and the impact sent pain shooting through her arms. She struggled to keep him upright as traffic roared by. "Easy, easy," she said, guiding him toward a nearby bench. The old man's breathing was shallow. His skin was pale. His eyes, sharp despite his age, searched her face with quiet panic. I can't remember," he whispered. "I was supposed to meet my son." Naomi felt her chest tighten. "What's your name?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Samuel. Just Samuel." She didn't ask for a last name. She didn't ask why a man dressed like that was wandering alone. She didn't ask anything that might make him uncomfortable. Instead, she sat him down and took off her jacket, draping it over his shoulders. "You're safe," she said. "We'll figure it out." Around them, people continued walking. No one stopped. No one offered help. No one even slowed down. Samuel noticed. His eyes followed every passerby, and then returned to Naomi. "You shouldn't waste your time on me," he said quietly. "You look like you have somewhere to be." Naomi smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I do," she admitted. "But you look like you need someone more than my boss does." That was the first crack in Samuel's composure. He studied her more closely now. The worn sneakers, the tired eyes, the way she tried to hide exhaustion behind politeness. "You're poor," he said, not unkindly. Naomi laughed softly. "Yeah," she said. "Very." She checked the time on her phone. She was officially late now. Still, she didn't move. Instead, she pulled out a bottle of water from her bag, the last one she had, and handed it to him. "Drink slowly." Samuel obeyed. His hands were shaking. "Do you remember your son's number?" Naomi asked. Samuel frowned, pressing his fingers to his temple. "I remember his voice," he said. "I remember his temper. I remember the way people get quiet when he enters a room." Naomi nodded, unsure what to say. "I don't remember the number." She exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "Then we'll do this another way." She looked around, spotted a small cafe across the street. "Can you walk?" Samuel nodded. Naomi helped him up, looping his arm around hers, and together they crossed the street, slowly, carefully, while drivers honked impatiently. Inside the cafe, the warmth hit them immediately. Naomi sat him down again and ordered tea and a sandwich. When the cashier told her the total, Naomi hesitated. It was more than she planned to spend today. She swallowed and paid anyway. Samuel noticed. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," Naomi replied, "but you're shaking, and I'm not leaving you like that." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said something that would later echo in her memory. "You have no idea whose path you've just stepped into." Naomi smiled again. "Sir," she said, pushing the sandwich toward him, "right now you're just a hungry old man who needed help." Samuel ate slowly, thoughtfully. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Naomi's phone buzzed again. Another message. She didn't open it. Finally, Samuel looked up. "My son will be looking for me," he said. "And when he does, he won't be calm." Naomi chuckled softly. "Most sons aren't." Samuel leaned back, eyes distant. "No," he said, "you don't understand." At that exact moment, across the city, inside a blacked-out SUV convoy, Dominic Vale stared at his phone with barely controlled fury. "Say it again," he said. His men shifted uncomfortably. "We lost him, sir." One finally admitted, "Your father disappeared after leaving the medical office. Phones are dead. No security detail." Dominic's jaw tightened. The city of Ravencroft didn't scare him. Politicians feared him. Judges owed him favors. Entire criminal networks answered to his name. But there was one man in the world he could not replace. His father. "Lock the city down," Dominic said coldly. "Check every street camera, every cafe, every bus station." The SUV accelerated. Back in the cafe, Naomi helped Samuel to his feet. "I can walk you to the police station," she offered. Samuel shook his head immediately. "No police." Naomi paused. "Okay." She didn't ask why. Instead, she wrote her number on a napkin and pressed it into his hand. "If you remember anything," she said, "or if you feel weak again, call me." Samuel stared at the napkin like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "You're doing this for nothing," he said. Naomi shrugged. "Kindness doesn't need a reason." Samuel stood up straight. For the first time, his presence changed. His back straightened. His eyes sharpened. The confusion lifted, just slightly. He looked like a man who once commanded rooms. "You'll regret this," he said softly. Naomi smiled. "Probably," she said, "but I'd regret it more if I didn't help." They walked outside together. Black SUVs turned onto the street. Samuel stopped walking. Naomi felt it immediately, the tension in his arm. "That's him," Samuel whispered. The vehicle screeched to a halt. Doors flew open. Men in black poured out. The street went silent. Naomi froze. Samuel squeezed her hand once, then let go. As Dominic Vale stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Naomi, not with anger, not with gratitude, but with sharp, calculating curiosity. And Naomi, standing there in worn shoes, with $5 left in her account, had no idea that her life had just crossed paths with one of the most dangerous men in the United States. Naomi didn't move. She stood on the sidewalk outside the cafe, her heart hammering so loudly she could barely hear the city anymore. The street had gone unnaturally quiet, like the world itself sensed something dangerous had arrived. Black SUVs lined the curb like a funeral procession. Men in black suits stepped out with the kind of discipline Naomi had only seen in movies, eyes scanning rooftops, hands near their waistbands, shoulders square like they were trained for violence. They didn't look like cops. They didn't look like security. They looked like men who didn't need permission to do anything. Samuel, still wrapped in Naomi's jacket, stood beside her, suddenly calm, almost resigned. Then the last SUV door opened, and Dominic Vale stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, built like a fighter who never stopped training. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, expensive enough to buy Naomi's entire apartment building. The black shirt beneath was open at the collar, revealing ink, dark tattoos climbing his neck like shadows. His face was coldly handsome, but not in a friendly way. His presence wasn't loud. It was heavier than that. It was the kind of presence that made people stop breathing without realizing it. Dominic's eyes moved quickly, first to Samuel, then to Naomi. And when his gaze settled on her, Naomi felt like she'd been pinned in place. Samuel spoke first. "Dominic," he said quietly. Dominic didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, stopping inches away from his father. For a moment, Naomi thought he might hug him. Instead, Dominic's voice came out low, controlled, dangerous. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Samuel didn't flinch. "You should have stayed with your detail," Dominic said. Samuel's eyes softened slightly. "I wanted to walk alone." Dominic's jaw tightened, like that explanation wasn't acceptable. Then Dominic turned to Naomi again, and Naomi realized something that made her blood run cold. Dominic wasn't relieved. He was furious, not at Naomi, at the world, at his men, at the fact that something had almost happened to his father that he couldn't control. Dominic's head tilted slightly as he studied Naomi like she was evidence in a case. "You," he said. Naomi swallowed. "Me? What did you do?" Naomi blinked. I helped him." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "How?" Naomi forced herself to speak, clearly even though her hands were shaking. "He almost collapsed. He looked lost. So I brought him inside. Got him water. Food." Dominic stared at her for a long second. "Food?" he repeated, like the word was foreign. Naomi felt suddenly defensive. He was hungry. Dominic's eyes dropped briefly to the jacket around his father's shoulders. "That's yours?" he asked. Naomi nodded. Dominic looked at Samuel again. "You took a stranger's jacket?" Samuel's voice stayed calm. "She offered." Dominic exhaled slowly, an angry breath disguised as control. Then he looked at Naomi again. "What's your name?" Naomi hesitated. Something in her screamed, "Don't." But Samuel was standing right there, watching her with a quiet, almost protective sadness. "Naomi," she answered. "Naomi Carter." Dominic nodded once, like he'd filed away in a locked drawer. Then he said something Naomi didn't expect. "Get in the car." Naomi stiffened. "What?" Dominic didn't repeat himself. He just stared. Naomi's throat went dry. Samuel immediately spoke up. "Dominic." "She didn't do anything." Dominic's eyes stayed on Naomi. "She's coming." Naomi took a step back. "Sir, I'm late for work." I can't." Dominic's voice got colder. "You can. You will." One of Dominic's men moved slightly, not threatening, just positioned to make it clear Naomi was no longer in control of the situation. Naomi's breathing quickened. This was real. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a rich businessman being dramatic. This was a man who was used to obedience. Samuel's eyes met Naomi's. "Go," he said gently. "You're safe." Safe. Naomi didn't feel safe. But she also knew something else. Refusing Dominic Vale in public with all his men watching could turn a terrifying situation into a deadly one. So Naomi did what survival told her to do. She nodded. Dominic turned without another word and walked back to the SUV. Naomi followed, legs stiff, mind racing. As she slid into the back seat, the leather was cold beneath her palms. The scent inside the car was expensive cologne and something else, something metallic like power. Samuel climbed in beside her. Dominic sat in the opposite seat, facing them. The door shut. The city noise vanished. And suddenly Naomi was trapped in a silent luxury cage with a man who looked like he could ruin her life with a single phone call. The SUV started moving. Naomi stared straight ahead, trying not to show fear. Dominic spoke without looking away from her. "Why did you help him?" Naomi blinked. "Because he needed help." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "That's not an answer." Naomi turned slightly, forced to meet his gaze. "It is," she said quietly. "He looked sick. People ignored him. I didn't want to." Dominic watched her like he was reading a lie. Then he leaned forward slightly. "You know who I am." It wasn't a question. Naomi's throat tightened. She'd heard the name Dominic Vale before. Everyone in Ravencroft had. Not on the news, not officially, but in whispers, in warnings, in the way store owners went quiet when black SUVs drove past. I didn't. Naomi lied. Dominic didn't react. He simply reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once, then held it up. A photo of Naomi appeared. Not a selfie, not social media. A surveillance-style photo of her walking into a bus station 2 weeks ago. Naomi's stomach dropped. Dominic spoke softly. "I know everything about you, Naomi Carter." Naomi's voice shook despite her efforts. "Why?" Dominic's eyes stayed cold. "Because there are two kinds of people in this city. People who want something, and people who pretend they don't." Naomi swallowed hard. "I don't want anything." Dominic stared. Then he said, "Everyone wants something." Naomi's hands curled into fists. "If you brought me here to accuse me of something, I didn't." Dominic cut her off. "I'm not accusing you." He leaned back slightly, watching her like he was evaluating her. "I'm testing you." Naomi's breath caught. "Testing me for what?" Dominic's eyes flicked to his father briefly. "My father doesn't trust strangers," he said. "If he accepted help from you, then either you're a rare kind of person," he paused, "or you're a problem." Naomi felt anger flare beneath her fear. "A problem?" she repeated. "I bought him food with money I didn't have. I gave him my jacket. And you think I'm a problem?" Dominic's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not warm. "People don't do that," he said. Naomi's eyes burned. "Well, I did." Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Do you know what happens to people who get involved with me?" Naomi didn't answer. Dominic's voice lowered. "They disappear. They get hurt. They lose everything they thought they had." Naomi's heart pounded. Samuel spoke softly. "Dominic." Dominic didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked on Naomi. "You should have walked away," Dominic said. Naomi's voice came out sharp. "I couldn't." Dominic's gaze sharpened. "Why?" Naomi hesitated. Then the truth spilled out before she could stop it. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible," she said. "I know what it feels like when you're drowning in front of people and they step around you like you're trash. I promised myself I'd never be that kind of person." Silence filled the car. Even Dominic's men in the front seat seemed to stop breathing. Samuel's eyes softened. Dominic's face didn't change, but something in his gaze shifted, almost imperceptibly, like the test result wasn't what he expected. The SUV turned sharply. Naomi glanced out the tinted window and realized they weren't heading toward downtown anymore. They were heading toward the edge of the city, toward the wealthy hills where Ravencroft's mansions sat behind iron gates. Naomi's pulse spiked again. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. Dominic's answer came cold and calm. "To see if you're real." Naomi's throat tightened. The SUV slowed. A massive iron gate came into view, guarded by armed men. The gate opened before the vehicle even stopped. They drove in. Naomi stared in shock as a mansion rose ahead. Stone walls, towering windows, manicured gardens, security cameras hidden in the trees. The SUV pulled up beneath a covered entrance. Dominic opened his door. "Come," he said. Naomi stepped out on shaky legs. The air smelled like wealth. Dominic walked ahead without looking back, confident she'd follow. And Naomi did, because fear had already taken away her choices. Inside, the mansion was silent, polished marble and warm lighting. Samuel walked slower now, still weak. Dominic moved beside him, protective in a way that looked more like control than love. A woman in a dark uniform appeared. House staff, eyes lowered, moving quickly. Dominic spoke to her quietly. "Call Dr. Hensley." "Now." The woman hurried off. Dominic turned to Naomi again. "Sit," he ordered. Naomi sat on a sofa that looked like it cost more than her entire life. Dominic stood in front of her, towering. "You're going to stay here tonight." Naomi's eyes widened. "What? No, Dominic's eyes hardened. "You're safe here," he said. "Outside, you're not." Naomi stared at him, confused. "I don't understand." Dominic's jaw tightened. "My father didn't just get lost," he said. Naomi's breath caught. Dominic leaned closer, his voice dropping to something darker. Someone wanted him vulnerable. Naomi's stomach turned cold. "And now," Dominic said quietly, "They know you were with him." Naomi's blood drained from her face, because suddenly she understood. Helping a lost old man wasn't the end of her trouble. It was the beginning. And Dominic Vale didn't bring her here to thank her. He brought her here because she was now part of the war, whether she wanted to be or not. Naomi didn't sleep. She tried. She really did. The guest room they put her in was bigger than her entire apartment. The bed was soft enough to swallow her whole. The sheets smelled like clean linen and money. But Naomi lay awake with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling while her brain replayed Dominic's last words again and again. "They know you were with him." Outside the tall window, the Ravencroft hills were dark and quiet. The mansion stood like a fortress, surrounded by iron gates, cameras, and armed guards who walked the perimeter like shadows. Naomi listened to every sound, every distant footstep, every door closing, every soft radio crackle from the hallway. And the worst part was the silence, because silence in a place like this didn't mean peace. It meant something was waiting. Her phone had been taken for safety. That's what they told her. She had no way to call her manager, no way to tell anyone she was okay, no way to explain why she didn't show up for work. She was simply gone. Naomi sat up, hugging the blanket tightly around her shoulders. She wasn't stupid. She knew what happened to people who got mixed up in powerful men's problems. Even if Dominic Vale wasn't the one who hurt her, his world would. A soft knock came at the door. Naomi flinched. Before she could answer, the door opened quietly. A woman stepped inside, calm and composed, wearing a dark uniform that looked more like security than house staff. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes were sharp. "I'm Mara," she said. "I oversee the house." Naomi swallowed. "Okay." Mara placed a tray on a small table. Tea, soup, bread. Naomi stared at it like it was a trap. Mara noticed. "You think it's poison?" she asked bluntly. Naomi's cheeks burned. "I didn't say that." Mara nodded slightly. "You didn't have to." She studied Naomi for a moment. "You did a kind thing," Mara said, "but you walked into something much bigger than kindness." Naomi's voice came out small. "Can I leave?" Mara's face didn't change. "No." Naomi's chest tightened. "So I'm a prisoner." Mara leaned slightly closer. "You're alive," she said. "And in Dominic Vale's world, that's not something to complain about." Then she turned and walked out as quietly as she entered, closing the door behind her. Naomi stared at the tray. Her stomach growled painfully. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Slowly, she forced herself to take a bite of bread. It tasted unreal. She ate cautiously, waiting for something terrible to happen. Nothing did. Minutes passed, then an hour. Finally, exhaustion dragged her under. Naomi woke to shouting. Not in her room, downstairs. Her eyes snapped open, heart racing. She swung her feet off the bed, rushed to the door, and pressed her ear against it. Voices. Male voices. One of them was Dominic. Cold, controlled, dangerous. Naomi couldn't make out the words, but the tone was enough to freeze her blood. Then she heard a different sound. A sharp, metallic click. The kind of sound you only hear when a gun is being prepared. Naomi stepped back from the door, trembling. She didn't belong here. She shouldn't be hearing this. She shouldn't even be alive in this place. But she was, and now she had to survive it. The hallway was empty. Naomi crept forward, following the sound of voices down a wide staircase lined with portraits of men she didn't recognize. Men with hard eyes and expensive suits. At the bottom, she stopped behind a pillar, peeking into a massive living room. Dominic stood near the fireplace, shirt collar open, tattoos visible above the black fabric, hands relaxed at his sides like he wasn't capable of violence. But Naomi could feel it. Violence lived in him like a second heartbeat. Two of Dominic's men were dragging someone across the marble floor. A man. His hands were tied behind his back. His face was bruised. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. And he was smiling. Naomi's stomach turned. The man was smiling like this was a game. Dominic's voice was calm. "Tell me who sent you." The man coughed, spitting blood. "You're slipping, Vale." Dominic's eyes didn't blink. I asked you a question. The man laughed hoarsely. You used to be faster, he said. You used to be smarter. Now you're letting old men wander around alone like it's a Sunday picnic. Naomi's breath caught. This was about Samuel. Dominic stepped closer. You touched my father, he said quietly. The man's grin widened. Did I? Or did you? Dominic's gaze sharpened. What does that mean? The man tilted his head, eyes gleaming. You think your father just got confused? You think he just wandered off? Naomi felt her pulse spike. The man's eyes flicked toward Naomi's hiding place, like he knew she was there. And Naomi realized with horror, this wasn't random. They wanted Dominic to find him. They wanted Dominic distracted. The man spoke again, louder now, almost performing. There's a girl, he said. A poor little girl who helped your daddy. Sweet, right? Naomi's blood went cold. Dominic's face remained still, but his eyes changed. A darker kind of focus. Say her name, Dominic said softly. The man smiled wider. Dominic's men stiffened. The air tightened. The man whispered, almost lovingly, Naomi Carter. Naomi's legs went weak. Dominic didn't turn around. He didn't need to. His men did. Two of them glanced in Naomi's direction instantly. Naomi stepped backward, panic rising like a wave. Dominic spoke, voice dangerously calm. How do you know her name? The man laughed again. Because we're already inside your house, he said. And because she's already marked. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Marked. Dominic's hand moved. Not fast, not dramatic. Just a small motion beneath his jacket. And suddenly there was a gun in his hand. Naomi's eyes widened. Dominic wasn't angry. He was surgical. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the man's face. You're going to tell me exactly who is behind this, Dominic said quietly, or I'm going to start removing pieces of you until you remember. The man's smile faltered, just a little. Dominic leaned even closer. You came into my city, he murmured. You put hands on my blood. You used an innocent girl as bait. His voice dropped. That's not business. Dominic's eyes locked onto his. That's disrespect. The man swallowed. Dominic waited. The man's confidence broke just enough. It's Calder, he whispered. The Calder Syndicate. Naomi didn't know the name, but Dominic's men reacted instantly. Faces tightening, eyes hardening. Dominic nodded once, like he already suspected it. Then he stood up, and Naomi expected the man to be dragged away. Instead, Dominic lifted the gun. Naomi's body froze. Dominic spoke softly, almost bored. Thank you. Then he shot him. One clean shot. The sound was deafening in the marble room. Naomi clapped both hands over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Blood sprayed across the floor. The man collapsed, still twitching. One of Dominic's men immediately dragged the body away as if it was trash. Naomi's stomach churned violently. This was real. This wasn't a story. This wasn't a movie. This was Dominic Vale's world. And she had just watched him end a life like it meant nothing. Dominic turned slightly. His eyes landed on Naomi. He had known she was there the entire time. Naomi stepped backward, trembling. Dominic's gaze softened, only by a fraction. Come here, he said. Naomi shook her head instinctively. Dominic didn't raise his voice, but the command carried weight. Naomi, he said again. Now. Her legs moved before her mind could argue. She walked forward slowly, like approaching a predator. The closer she got, the more she noticed details that terrified her. His hands were steady, his breathing normal, his face calm. He wasn't shaken. Dominic Vale didn't just kill. He handled killing. Naomi stopped a few feet away, eyes glossy with fear. Dominic looked down at her. You saw that, he said. Naomi's voice trembled. Yes. Dominic nodded once. Good. Naomi blinked, shocked. Good. Dominic stepped closer. You need to understand something, he said. My enemies don't play fair. They don't care that you're innocent. They'll use you because you were kind to my father. Naomi's throat tightened. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. Dominic's eyes held hers. No, he agreed. You didn't. Then his voice lowered, darker. But now you're in it. Naomi's hands shook. What do they want? Dominic's jaw flexed. They want leverage, he said. They want my father vulnerable. They want me reckless. His eyes narrowed. And now they want you. Naomi's breath caught. Dominic turned his head slightly and spoke to one of his men. Bring her coat. Pack a bag. Naomi panicked. What? Where are we going? Dominic looked at her. To hide you, he said. Naomi's heart pounded. Hide me from who? Dominic's answer chilled her. From the people who just prove they can reach into my house. Naomi's mouth went dry. His house was a fortress. If they could reach here, then nowhere in Ravencroft was safe. A guard rushed in, breathless, speaking urgently into Dominic's ear. Dominic's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. What? He asked. The guard swallowed. They hit the east gate, he said. Shots fired. 2 down. Naomi's blood turned to ice. Dominic's gaze snapped to her. And for the first time, Naomi saw something in him that wasn't just power. It was a protective fury, so intense it felt like heat. Dominic stepped forward, gripping Naomi's shoulder, not roughly, but firmly. You stay with me, he said. Naomi's voice broke. Dominic. He cut her off. Do you trust me? Naomi stared at him, horrified. How could she trust a man who just shot someone in cold blood? But then she remembered the man's words. We're already inside your house. And she remembered Dominic's warning. They'll use you. Naomi swallowed hard. She didn't trust Dominic because he was good. She trusted him because he was the only one powerful enough to keep her alive. Naomi nodded shakily. Dominic's voice dropped into a growl. Then don't let go. The mansion lights flickered. A distant explosion shook the walls. Naomi screamed. Dominic pulled her behind him instantly, body shifting into a protective stance like it was instinct. His men drew their weapons. Shouts echoed through the halls. And Naomi realized something terrifying. This wasn't just protection anymore. This was war. And she was standing at the center of it, next to the most dangerous man in the city. The explosion echoed through the mansion like thunder. Glass shattered somewhere down the east wing. Alarms screamed to life. Red emergency lights washed over the marble walls, turning the house into something unrecognizable. Less like a home, more like a battlefield. Naomi froze. Her ears rang. Her chest felt too tight to breathe. Dominic didn't freeze. He moved. Instantly, he stepped in front of Naomi, his body blocking hers completely. One arm pulling her tight against his back as his other hand raised the gun with calm, terrifying precision. Basement route, he ordered sharply. Now! His men moved like machines. 2 sprinted ahead. 2 stayed behind, covering angles. Another grabbed Samuel, supporting him as explosions continued to rock the far end of the house. Naomi clung to Dominic's jacket as they moved, her legs barely keeping up. Gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening. Shots cracked through the hall, bullets shattering glass cases and ripping chunks from the walls. Dominic fired back without hesitation, each shot measured, controlled. Naomi squeezed her eyes shut, terrified. She felt Dominic tense every time he fired. Steady, focused, lethal. This wasn't rage. This was protection. They reached a hidden door behind a wall panel. Dominic shoved it open, ushering Naomi inside first. The stairwell beyond was narrow and dimly lit. Keep moving, Dominic said, his voice low but firm. Naomi nodded, tears streaking down her face as she forced her legs to move. Another explosion boomed above them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Naomi stumbled. Dominic caught her instantly, lifting her slightly off the ground to keep her moving. Don't stop, he said. Look at me. She did. His eyes were locked on hers, steady, commanding, grounding. You're going to survive this, he said. I won't let them touch you. Something in his voice broke through her panic. Not a promise, a certainty. They burst into an underground garage lined with armored vehicles. Gunfire echoed behind them. Dominic pushed Naomi toward a black SUV. Get in, he ordered. She climbed in, hands shaking. Samuel was helped into another vehicle, already pale but conscious. Dominic turned back toward the stairwell as his men took positions. Naomi realized with sudden horror that he wasn't getting into the car. "You're not coming?" she shouted. Dominic glanced back at her. "If I leave now, they follow," he said. "If I stay, they die." Naomi's heart shattered. "You can't." Dominic cut her off sharply. "I'm not asking." He slammed the door shut. The engine roared to life. Naomi screamed his name as the SUV tore out of the garage, tires screeching, bullets striking the metal exterior. She watched through the rear window as Dominic turned back toward the chaos, alone, unflinching, disappearing into smoke and gunfire. They didn't stop until sunrise. The safe house was nothing like the mansion. No marble, no chandeliers, just reinforced concrete, quiet hallways, and armed guards at every door. Naomi sat on the edge of a bed, staring at her hands. They were still shaking. She replayed everything again and again. The gunshot, the blood, Dominic's eyes as he pushed her into the car. A doctor checked Samuel, stabilizing him, murmuring reassurances. Hours passed. No word from Dominic. Naomi felt hollow. What if he didn't make it? What if she was the reason he stayed behind? The thought crushed her chest. Finally, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Naomi looked up. Dominic stepped into the room. His suit was torn. Blood stained his sleeve. Not his. A cut marked his cheek. His eyes were darker now, heavier, but he was alive. Naomi didn't think. She ran to him. Before she could stop herself, she slammed into his chest, arms wrapping around him as she sobbed uncontrollably. For a split second, Dominic stiffened. No one touched him like this. No one. Then, slowly, his arms came up. He held her. Not tight, not possessive. Just steady, like anchoring something fragile. "It's over," he said quietly. "They won't try again." Naomi pulled back, tears streaming. "You stayed," she whispered. "You could have died." Dominic looked at her, something raw in his eyes. "They used you," he said. "That made it personal." Samuel watched them from bed, his gaze thoughtful. "You saved her," Samuel said. Dominic shook his head. "She saved herself," he replied. Then his eyes returned to Naomi. "And she saved you." Naomi blinked. "Me?" Samuel smiled weakly. "You reminded my son of something he forgot," he said. "That power doesn't begin with fear. It begins with choice." Dominic looked away. "I built my life on control," he admitted quietly. "I told myself kindness was weakness." He met Naomi's eyes again. "You proved me wrong." Naomi swallowed. "I never wanted anything from you," she said. "I just couldn't walk away." Dominic nodded slowly. "I know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, setting it on the table. "What's that?" Naomi asked. "A clean apartment," Dominic said. "A job. School tuition, if you want it. Protection for life." Naomi stared at it. This was the moment stories always built toward. The reward. The transformation. She shook her head. "I didn't help your father for this." Dominic's lips pressed together. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm offering." Naomi hesitated, then spoke softly. "Then let me earn it," she said. "I don't want charity. I want a chance." Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Not cruel, not cold. Respectful. "You work for one of my legitimate businesses," he said. "Paid. Protected. Clean." Naomi nodded slowly. "Okay." Samuel exhaled in relief. Days later, Naomi walked through Ravencroft without fear. People still rushed past. The city was still loud. But something had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. And Dominic Vale, feared by everyone, watched her from a distance, not as an asset, not as leverage, but as the one person who reminded him who he could have been. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in a ruthless world is a single act of kindness,